the purpose of the day really is to give you a bit of a background to the app marketplace if you don't already, if you're not already aware of this. Now this may be teaching you to suck eggs in a lot of cases, but hopefully it'll give you some information from that point of view. We're also going to show you, as previously discussed with those who are in the room, we're not going to run into the joys of this is how to code things in whatever OS that you want to be coding things in. We can talk about that afterwards if that's appropriate to what you're wanting to do. But we're going to be showing you how to create stuff hopefully as easily as possible from a starting point that is okay. If maybe you've got a schematic in a PDF, or maybe you've got existing publications that you're trying to get into an app format. So that's going to be the mainstay of the day. We'll also have a look at some of the other pitfalls and pratfalls that you can potentially get into when you consider things like multimedia and video, and what's the benefits of those basically. So as mentioned, without further ado, let's sort of kick into the joys of a bit of background to the industry. Now, this slide is slightly out of date, but I'll put it up there for good reasons, because they're suggesting, Morgan Stanley this is suggesting that basically by somewhere around now, there should be more people browsing the internet via the joys of mobile devices, tablets, phones, etc., than there are on laptops. Now, I put it up there because that sounded excitingly, will that happen or not? And it's already happened, because basically in the States, this slide's relevant too, but across the world we're getting far more people now who are using apps in order to be looking into the joys of anything online really. Now some of that is because it's moving over from things like Facebook into an app environment rather than just logging on via the internet, via a web browser basically. But at the end of the day, the fact that it's on a mobile environment is kind of pertinent to what we're talking about today. And this is a breakdown. This is July last year. The stats we're looking at, by the way, here are all from a company called Flurry. Now, I don't know if anybody's heard of Flurry, but it's one of the big analytics companies that we'll come back to in a little while, because this could be all entirely beneficial for yourselves, basically. Because if what you want to do is create something and actually find out, more information rather than just shove it out there and hope for the best, getting a link into analytics is very important for you. So, but as I say, ignoring that, we'll come back to that and how it works later on and how they work. But essentially, what they're saying here is, okay, we've got a massive marketplace that is being accessed and serviced nowadays by this app sellings. But as mentioned, Facebook and other sort of social media are taking up a big chunk of that. Just out of interest, show of hands, who's got an iPhone or iPad? Android-based phone? Ooh, Android-based tablet? Kindle? Okay, all right, that's interesting. Just so you're aware, I'm the ex-publishing manager or business development manager for Apple, so therefore I have a lot of Apple shares. So if we can get those few that weren't actually already on the Apple, that'd be nice. But basically, Apple is still very much taking the lion's share in America anyway, as far as the OS, the iOS, the tablet, the mobile space, smart device. That's the phrase, isn't it? Couldn't think of anything apart from an Apple acronym or phrase there. It's so embedded in. But at the end of the day, they're certainly still owning that space as far as, in particular, tablets are concerned. So, something that either way, though, you need to be, I suppose, considering both, because even if it's only 40% that are on Android, you need to be able to service that marketplace as well. And more importantly, there's rather a lot of money involved in this. So, that's quite a big number, really, isn't it, in the grand scheme of things. So, if what we talked to you about today gives you the opportunity to at least get some of that, or be part of the increase in that, because undoubtedly it's going to grow as well, then that's a good thing, isn't it? I don't know, I suppose I should ask actually, I always tend to assume that an audience is wanting to make money out of things that I'm talking about, but is there anybody here on a non-money-making venture? Is anybody got more of a philanthropic attitude? Yes, okay, so sort of learning or?
Yeah, so for the Financial Conduct Authority.
Okay, right, fine.
So
More communications based then, yeah? Okay, great. So I'll try and temper back what I'm saying to not just be about...
And I can always appreciate making mini doses. Yeah.
Well, indeed, yeah, yeah. Because you were the one who went, oh yeah. 20-something. So I suppose, you know, the important thing to say is, great, if there's that amount of money behind the marketplace, then whether you are trying to take a chunk of it or whether you're using this as a communications basis, either way, it's going to be a nice, stable environment to be working in, as opposed to perhaps, you know, if currently how you're communicating is via printed means and via distribution in that basis, it's kind of a dying marketplace. So fundamentally, that you know that that's going to become more expensive to deliver through, because the economies of scale basically will reduce down. So therefore, you know, it's going to be more expensive to shift printed literature, distribute it. I mean, it already is. Just looking at the instant sort of, okay, how do I get my publications or my communications to the other side of the world? If I do that in a physical format, that costs a lot of money. If I do that in, right, a nice ethereal, floaty, it's on the internet base, then great, that's a lot cheaper. But maybe there's some other ways in which we can do it that make some money for you. So, looking at how that chunk of marketplace is made up, you know, these being the... I'm sorry, anybody, I should have asked actually, has anybody got a Windows phone? No, okay. Anybody ever seen one? So, okay. Anyway, I gather they're really good. But as we stand at the moment, this is the majority of the marketplace. Again, these are nice figures from Flurry from last year, basically. So, key thing I want to identify for you here is that colour. Unfortunately, almost the same colour. That colour there. So, a quarter of the iPad marketplace is made up. Maybe that's because that's a, I don't know, different type of more multimedia. They've moved, oh, you know, so that's down. But actually, non-children's books side of things is actually increased rather dramatically. So, actually that's quite a good growing marketplace for those of us, therefore, who aren't necessarily focused. Is anybody focused in children's literature and that sort of marketplace? Right. Okay. So for all the rest of us, maybe that's an interesting thing to be focused on. Yeah, this is kind of a, harping back to my earlier comments, a bit of a bugbear on my part. It's largely still an Amazon or a Kindle world, basically, as far as ebooks are concerned. But it's something that is growing on all sides of things, as the previous slide showed. So, key takeaway is, don't consider that, or don't write it off. Basically, you need to have a strategy here that suits how or what sort of communications you want to be delivering, what sort of apps you want to be delivering. Now, it may well be that an ebook is a good augmented product there, that is something that actually can extend out, maybe deliver, certainly for things like training and internal communications, for instance, within companies, is actually quite a good means of doing it. There are bits that it doesn't pick up on, though, which we'll cover off in a bit. So therefore, it's a good ubiquitous way of getting stuff out there. And of course, there are more devices that can easily read an ebook. You can even read ebooks on computers, on desktop machines, basically. So, this is why the Apple side of things is actually growing, because of course you can read Kindle books on the Apple devices. So therefore, it's something that I think we will see a resurgence of. I think we'll see that graph going up again, basically in a not too short time. In fact, probably already is. Now, as mentioned, apologies for those people in the room who are just lovely NGOs and non-financially focused. Hopefully there is obviously some opportunities here as far as what your interests are concerned in reducing costs anyway. But yes, you can certainly make money. Key things to bear in mind on the app side of things versus the ebook side of things. So you've actually got a conduit here, very large amount of technology really when you consider it, where previously if you produced a printed magazine or a brochure or a catalogue or whatever it is, you'd have to worry about all that logistics side of things. You'd have to worry about, if you're selling it, the monetary logistics as well, the actual admin side of things. The joys of, be it iTunes or whatever, Google Play, etc., whatever the marketplace is concerned, is obviously taking a large chunk of that pain away from you. It's also giving you the opportunity to extend your marketplaces. So therefore, you can pop things into whatever out of those marketplaces, iTunes, for instance, that is going worldwide. So suddenly, as opposed to just being focused on a localized area, localized geography, you've got that opportunity to spread your wings a lot further. Now, again, that could be something that is financially rewarding, giving you a bigger marketplace, or it could just be a great way of accessing different geographies in order to deliver to them quicker, easier, faster, etc., etc. This is probably a big one to consider, though, as far as subscriptions are concerned. And again, this is a question of, irrespective of whether you are selling your apps or whether it's something that you are giving out for free, basically. If what you're using an app for is communication of some description, and certainly within this scenario, we're sort of looking at the sort of non-profit-making scenario, we're looking at least communications as far as important literature is concerned and basically compliance as well as concerned. Having a subscription service is a good thing because it gives you the opportunity to not have to worry about that person you're delivering to having to go and get it. This subscription side of things allows you to get into that scenario where, great, okay, it can just be delivered automatically. Now, therefore, if you're doing this, as discussed, perhaps in a compliance environment where you need to make sure lawyers or financial bods, nurses, doctors, etc., need to actually be reading, consuming, and getting information, great, that's a super way of actually making sure that you actually get it to them. Obviously, from a business point of view, if what you're doing is selling something, then great. Again, it's a good thing because people can sign up for your subscriptions. And of course, you instantly get that move to not having to worry about selling to them again because essentially they've already signed up for it. So key thing here is, and this is a differentiator, newsstand versus general apps. Newsstand puts you in the situation where, in the case of, in particular, Apple, which is going to be more of the focus today, not necessarily because of my history and shares, but because more down to, okay, it is, as we've seen, the market leader as far as the tablets are concerned. But this is going to give you that opportunity to make sure, okay, great, I don't have to worry about having to go back out there and make sure people are getting it. If you can get it into Newsstand, you can get subscriptions set up. But it needs to be something, in order to qualify for being in Newsstand, you need to have something that is a regular publication. So is this making sense to everyone at the moment? Yeah, okay, cool. Does it sort of tick boxes with the sort of things you're wanting to do or thinking about as well, yeah? Okay, great. Cool. So, and let's also remind you, 27 billion. So it's a big chunk of money, isn't it? You know. So in case you've forgotten, I think we ought to reiterate that just to say to you, if you're thinking about making money out of it, you've got an opportunity. Now,
does it specify how?
In what respect?
Frequent it has to be.
We are streaming this, aren't we? So I think the guidance is around quarterly. I'm not aware so far of anybody being checked up on if they happen to say it's going to be quarterly and then they don't do it that frequently. So, but so therefore, yeah, it's a good thing to get into, certainly as far as Newsstand is concerned. Now, we're not just talking about publications, and I wanted to also bring this into some other sort of conversational pieces. So I used to, for instance, run Nick Software in the UK. I don't know if anybody knows Nick Software, but basically, lovely little company based out of what sort of conglomeration of Germany and the States. Now they produce something called Snapseed, or we produce something called Snapseed, and effectively this was a photo retouching app. So not a publication-based, communication-based app, but actually a physical it does something app. Now, effectively, that went to #1 in the marketplace within the first week of, well, it was a massive success, basically. Within the first weekend, or by the end of the first weekend, we'd actually paid for the R&D time. Now, it was growing from an existing desktop software, so it was taking elements of that, and therefore, there was a large amount of the R&D that had already been done. But as far as the actual just converting the iOS side of things, it was a tremendous success as far as delivering that into an app environment, and a tremendous success from the point of view, okay, great, we got it into that app of the week position that first week, so it really went like wildfire. Within a year, we had 9 million downloads, which was rather nice. Now, some of that was free, some of that wasn't, basically. So this is something to consider when you're doing this. I would highly recommend anybody who's creating an app, if you are going to sell it, make that price that you start off with a premium price, and then you can always give it, specials later on. But it's a lot harder if you start at a low price and then try and ramp that back up again afterwards. But the good thing with this was it basically won a whole bunch of awards. So it was like the app of the year by the end of, well, in fact, by 6 months in fact, of sales. It was the app of the year for Apple. So that was rather nice commendation. We won a bunch of other awards as well, I mean, Macworld being one of them. But then this happened, which again might be sort of something to aspire to, because for those who don't know, Google came along and said, "Oh, right, tell you what, we'll buy you," and effectively bought out the company. So it's now part of Google Plus. Nice little solution. Interesting to see what they're doing as well. And it certainly seems to be the case, to me anyway, that it was really the Snapseed side of things that was driving that. Again, coming back to mobile apps, etc., etc. So maybe an aspirational opportunity for you guys. I don't know if you're thinking about creating an app. There's obviously not everybody gets approached every day. I mean, there was Snapchat last year, wasn't there? That was offered $3 billion by Google, and he turned it down. So that's again, maybe money isn't everybody's boat, but I think it's worthwhile considering that you can make money out of this anyway, if you want to. Now, I suppose the key thing with all this is also to say to you, okay, what do we need to do? And the key thing with this, the reason why Nick did very well with Snapseed, the reason why a lot of the publishers that we work with succeed or fail, is by making things compelling. And I'd suggest to you, that one of those things that makes things compelling is the joys of this, i.e. video. It gave me a chance to have a sip of water anyway. At the end of the day, what's becoming very apparent is if you've got something moving in there, some sort of extra bit of animation, some video in there, if you are producing, for instance, a publication, and that is what you're aiming to get into the app world, or if you're producing something, for instance, that is a communication, it's more compelling basically if you get it into a video-based format for things like advertising. This is the sort of stuff that's actually driving interest basically, and therefore if it drives interest, people are going to actually pay attention to what you're doing. So from a communications point of view, getting into this marketplace in a video format is paying off. It's also, photo and video is the fastest growing part of the apps marketplace. So therefore if what you're looking at creating is something based around that, that's kind of good, isn't it, really? You're sort of backing the right horse, fundamentally. Fastest growing, it has to be said, not the biggest. You've already seen some breakout of what's the actual percentage of app marketplace, but fastest growing, basically. And, effectively you're getting a darn sight more time per month, per week, per et cetera, based around photo and video. So therefore, the more of that you can put into your scenario, the better. Now, little advert on behalf of Dreamtek here. Dreamtek fundamentally is a video-based creation company, so therefore we're also an app creation company, we're also app developers, etc., so we can either help you on that side of things, but also as far as that video implementation is concerned, we can also help you there, if you need it. So all that we're putting forward today really is to say to you, okay, here's some things you should do potentially. If you want to do it yourself, great, super. If you want to be helped along the way, we can do that. And if you want, we can just put you in the right direction. So we're here to help. Hopefully, that's what today will be rewarding for you on that basis. Now, for those in particular who are thinking of this not necessarily in a financial money-making environment, this is an important point. You don't have to use apps, or for that matter ebooks, on an external basis. I.e. you don't have to be thinking about this being out onto the joys of iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Marketplace. Windows? Anybody know what that's called? No. Okay. Windows 8 Store, I think, perhaps. Who knows? It's going to be big, though, I have to say. I mean, I'm perhaps being a little bit jokey about the Windows side of things, but I think that is definitely one to watch. And also, it's definitely one to watch from the point of view that because there's a darn sight less apps there, there's what, probably 1 million apps now, 900,000 last time I checked, but probably 1 million apps now on Google and on the Apple marketplaces. But, I don't know how many, a lot less on the, I think it's 200,000 on the Windows side of things. But exactly, who knows? But probably Microsoft don't. But at the end of the day, that means it's obviously a lot easier. You've got a lot less competition in there, basically, if you're trying to get somebody's attention. So that could be something to bear in mind with all this. But anyway, either way, whatever it may be, I didn't even put Windows up there. You can use this internally within companies or within organisations, within societies, as well as externally. So this is something you can either set up, you can do things like setting up your own enterprise servers for things like iTunes, which makes phones ring, or you can effectively set up within your apps the ability to have just people that you want getting access to them. So being able to set up essentially a subscription service, if you like, or the ability just to access into certain bits of content. So we can cover off a bit about that really later on. I mean, the important thing is if you've got people like the Pentagon saying, ooh, we're going to be having app stores internally here and people using apps, then that's a kind of a good indication that, okay, it's being endorsed as a communications practice wherever. I mean, the White House launched a whole bunch of papers saying, you know, that digital communications should be the prevalent means of actually communicating nowadays. They are pushing people to doing away with paper. You know, they've been doing that for a couple of years now. I think it was certainly last year one of their white papers, and the same is true in the UK as well. You know, there's this encouragement to actually move to a digital form of communication. So now, for those of you who like popular boy bands, this isn't for you. But basically, it's not just one direction, by which I mean coming back to the analytics side of things, what I talked about earlier on, i.e., whether you're doing this internally or whether you're doing this externally, it's kind of nice to actually get some information. Now, Flurry I mentioned as being one of the companies that do exactly this. Now, they give us a whole bunch of rich information, because what Flurry do is it's a company, one of various, that track what's going on. So they have links into apps. So for instance, they've got over 400,000 apps that they're following that are tied in with their service. That's quite a lot. Which essentially gives them details on 1.3 trillion app events per month. So that's quite a lot of information they're following there, basically. And it's the sort of thing that gives us this sort of you know, nice, rich details around things like China. Anybody deal with the sort of China or India or any of the BRIC countries at all? No? Okay, well, maybe you should. You've got the opportunity to now if you go into the app environment. So that there is how many smart devices there are in China at the moment. The blue line again being the same in the USA. So the US marketplace is pretty saturated, and yes, as it says, effectively you've got about 4 times the market that you could go after in China. Same in India, basically. So massive opportunity, still barely tapped. But even as it is a massive opportunity. So the key thing with this is Flurry, different companies like that, Zitty is another one, spelled with an X. So I'm presuming I'm pronouncing it correctly anyway. Give us this lovely opportunity to get into a whole bunch of feedback. So if you are delivering something to customers, if you are selling apps, being able to tie in with analytics means that, okay, I can find out, for instance, you know, who, maybe not specifically who, but how many people in a particular area have downloaded a particular app, who's opened certain bits of it. If it's a publication-based type of app you're looking at, great. Who's viewed X advert? You know, if you're into advertising, that's a very powerful thing to be able to feed back to somebody is, yeah, okay, you know, you put your advert out there and look, this is how many people actually viewed that advert. This is a very good thing to be able to report back. Who's spent time, and it gives us the opportunity to actually think about how we're building our apps as well. So if, for instance, you are going into the joys of publications, taking existing stuff that has been previously a magazine, a brochure, a training guide, or whatever it may be, and putting that into an app environment. If, for instance, this tells you that, well, absolutely everybody was interested in the first few articles and 0 people were interested in that article, but that might tell you, A, something about the way you're designing it, B, you know, the demographics you're dealing with, maybe you're hitting the wrong place. So very, very powerful stuff. So this is the thing you really need to make sure you have in your apps, whatever the type of app is. Get some feedback. And unfortunately, this is the sort of the benefit, if you like, of apps over ebooks, because you're going to get a lot less information back from an ebook environment than you are from an app environment. So there's a good balance here, and have a chat with us. It's specific to what you are wanting to do and what you are doing. But as mentioned, ebooks could be great from okay, it's a training guide, it's a compliance document, it's a health and safety document, boomf, over there it goes. But if, for instance, you need to say, okay, and actually have you read this, this would actually check whether people have read this. Okay? So it's a two-edged sword here, basically, from the point of view of being able to give you some information on how you should build things, and also what other information you can get back. So, right, that was half an hour on the background. Let's have a think about how we can do this, basically. So, our philosophy on the Dreamtek front is tripartite. Does that mean 3-way? I don't know. 3 bits to it. So, key thing seems to be make sure that what you're actually creating is compelling, as discussed. You know, make it immersive, make it something that works, and get it in there such that you can actually start getting that feel of mixture of content that's working well, and also make it feel like it was intended for the device. As we started right in the early doors there, I said to you, oh, by the way, the phone marketplace isn't getting so much of that newsstand area. That's because not many people produce a specific version of their content for a phone. It's generally speaking, oh look, here's our catalogue brochure, etc., in the publication side of things. And you can see it on a phone as well. It's going to be really small, so that's not necessarily going to be a great thing. So have a think about what devices you want to be feeding to. Hopefully what the stats I showed you at the start there give you a feel for what's appropriate for the sort of apps, in inverted commas, that you want to be doing. By the way, this thing that we're showing here on the video, this is one of our products called the pod, broadcast pod, and essentially it's a if you like a studio, because as a company we put studios into corporates, into banks, etc. What this is essentially a studio in drop it off and get it off the back of a pickup truck and it's there. Not quite delivered in that fashion, obviously, but fundamentally it's a means of getting you into a nice environment which is air conditioned, got an auto cue, got a high quality HD video camera in there, could be 4K, and basically gives you that feed of that ability to capture. So if it's things you want to be capturing at a corporate level, great for doing that, basically. So if I want to get that CEO's speech captured, and I need that to be in really good quality, and also not looking like he's umming and ahhing all the way through it, then this is a great way of doing it. He says umming and ahhing. And last thing for you guys, and this is what we're going to be covering off in the next bit, is, okay, Dreamtek as a company, he says, banging his microphone, can put you in the situation of, okay, as mentioned, we could get you trained up if you want to, or get you into the situation of being able to record video, produce content, design stuff, etc. Lovely. Okay, or we can say to you, all right, here's some stuff that you can use that you can do it yourself. And for the stuff that we choose in order to say to you, this is what you can use, we like to make that as approachable, as easy to use as possible. So you can think of us as being the sort of recommended guide, if you like, for some of the stuff in the app world, in the video world, etc. So if you need any advice, just give us a call. So that brings us on to how do we create some of these lovely apps that we've been talking about. Now, as mentioned, we've got a range of different ways we can get to an app. Really what we're going to be focusing on today is starting from some form of, be it a PDF or an output, maybe just from a PowerPoint presentation you produced a PDF, and that can give you the genesis of what you're going to be doing as far as apps are concerned. More regularly, I think for the majority of people here today, there is some sort of existing publication that is looking to be transferred into an app environment. Now that could come from a PDF, it could come from InDesign. What we'll be showing you when we swap over in a minute is more how to do that. If you can start from InDesign or Quark and things like that, then it gives you the opportunity to do more as far as creation is concerned. Albeit, actually, we can now do more with PDFs as well. We can take that into an environment which you can actually effectively convert into InDesign, if you like. So I know not all of you are in this publishing environment at the moment, but for those who uses InDesign at the moment? Some hands. Quark Express. Who is? All right, both. And PDFs. People creating PDFs. I know some of you are creating iBooks. Okay. And of course, lastly, what we can do is say, all right, well, we'll start from the ground up. We'll start from coding something. You really do need to start at least with something that you've got an idea, a schema of what you're going to be creating an app with. But the good thing is we can train you if you want, or do it for you as far as saying, okay, give us the idea and we can build an app for you. We've got loads of apps that we have created on that basis. So we can get to this situation. So that could be an ebook, could be an app, could be a bespoke app, doesn't matter what. Could be a website, in fact, as well. Now, the key solution we're going to look at and demonstrate after the break. Oh, there's a look of thank God it's not all slides on some people's faces. So after we swap over, is based around this Aquafadas solution, which some of you may have seen on our website. Now, this is a solution which we've adopted here, and we run for the company in the UK. It's actually a French created solution, and you'll see why, I hope, why we recommend this as a starting point for getting into app production when we actually show you it in demonstration. But at the end of the day, you need to know that, okay, this is a company that is owned by Kobo. Anybody got a Kobo reader? I didn't ask that one, did I? No? Okay. Anybody heard of a Kobo reader? Oh, right, good. Okay. And effectively, they're in turn owned by Rakuten. So, you know, it's for those of you who know Play.com, for instance, also owned by Rakuten. Big Asian-based company. So essentially, big money behind them. I think you're also going to see Kobo racing up as far as the reader environment is concerned as well. So you're going to see a lot more about that. The good thing that it does for us is gets us into this situation of being able to take these sort of existing publications, these ideas of communications, etc., and getting them into going out to any sort of app type of environment, basically. It's something that, you know, covers the whole range of. Oh, that's not an Apple-based device. You see, I have tried to be fairly ambivalent about these things, but it gets us into being able to deliver to whatever device you want in pretty much any format, and it doesn't have to be just sort of apps. It could be ebooks as well. This is an important bit. If you have an existing production team that is producing your communications, publications, etc., at the moment, we're talking about a solution here that you can leverage that is going to use that existing skill set. We're not talking about taking an existing design, communications, marketing team, etc., and saying, buy and let's wheel in some developers. It's very much putting you in the situation of, okay, if you've got existing skill sets here, we can actually get that crossed over into this lovely app environment, basically. And it's also something that now there's an automated solution as well. And this is quite an interesting one as well, because I mentioned, you know, PDFs in here. And PDFs, for those of you who've seen some publications or publication-based apps, a lot of them initially were focused around, all right, let's take a PDF and essentially just squirt it into an app. And that wasn't a particularly rewarding or winning scenario, because there was a lot of people who downloaded this app and thought, there is not a great deal of that compelling stuff I mentioned in there. You know, it wasn't really designed looking as if it was aimed at the device it's on. It was, right, let's take a A4 size publication and cram it down into a tablet size publication or a phone size publication. So not a great scenario. Whereas what we're talking about here isn't that. Could be, if you really want it to be. But we've got the opportunity here now to say, okay, take your PDFs, get them into this automated cloud-based solution that we've got around the Aquafadas solution. But then you can actually enrich it. You can actually take it back into a format where we can actually say, okay, let's add some video in, let's rescale this, let's look at it in a different way. So that's very powerful for any, you know, larger publishers, for instance, that want to take existing stuff that they are churning out day after day after day and saying, well, tell you what, you know, let's repurpose this into something more compelling and different. Because the more different you can make it in that environment, the better. Because if it is just a facsimile version of that magazine that you're churning out at the same time, there's no benefit. It's going to be an either-or situation. If you can make it different and you can make both compelling, you have two bites of the cherry. And perhaps a third option would be, okay, let's make an ebook version of it for some communications. I mean, again, naughty me, I am going back down the route of, okay, making money out of this, aren't I? But hopefully, even if you're not, you can get the same sort of scenario going as far as internal communications, external communications, non-charged for communications that could be done in this basis. So input-wise, there's a whole bunch of different options here. Now, I mentioned Quark Express. Got a lot of old buddies there, but at the end of the day, it's not the be-all and end-all of the latest versions of Quark Express, it has to be said, but you know, I think there's a niche for that side of things that InDesign is probably better fulfilling nowadays. Good thing is on the InDesign side of things, covers everything, so that's all good. And we've got, more importantly, this opportunity to get, okay, things like XML into the work as well. So we can actually automate this piece as well. And that's a more advanced or broader solution than what we're going to be showing you today. Effectively what we're saying, do we all know what XML is? Some yeses, some, I'm not going to be seen to be shaking my head. So basically we're talking about metadata tagged information here. We're talking about blocks of text, for instance, in magazines that you know, could be it's the magazine, or we could just take the text out of it and use that. And this is how we get around this issue of designing stuff for different sized formats. We can automate this such that, okay, we take what is a page of guidebook, article, report and accounts, whatever it may be, that's this size, and A4, and we, using XML, if we've got that data that's sitting behind it, can say, okay, well, we'll take that little article within there, and just that will be the bit, if we press and hold, that will appear on our phone screen. So when we first open it, we can see the whole formatted page, etc., really small, and then we can press on it and bring up the bigger information, you know, the particular articles we want to be focusing on in, okay, it's text and some images, but it hasn't got that formatting from the page there. It just takes out that metadata, basically, the XML feed. So that's, as I say, that's a more advanced scenario than we're talking about today, but if you want to know more about that in practice, then please come and have a chat. And as mentioned, so outputs, here's some of them actually, not all of them. So we can take you into them. This is this reflow side of things is what I'm referring to here. So it's taking, there's the page, if you can just see the same picture there of the young lady, and that is the article. So press and hold and you end up with this reflowed, as we call it, article. So we can essentially distill down, if you like, to give you an easier read version on a phone or smaller device. But we can go into the full whammy of rich media there, or that middle ground of an enriched PDF, or a website actually. So you know, we can also say, okay, tell you what, we'll take it into this EPUB environment as well. Same scenario, same content, don't have to repurpose it, don't have to rework it again. We can take the same stuff in the first place and produce that. Or of course we could give you the opportunity to say, all right, here's the same content structure or the same original bits of content, but you can chop and change bits that are appropriate and you want to be in EPUBs and have that alongside any apps as well. All right. And lastly, yes, you can produce a web-based version of your magazines. Now, I have to say we tend not to focus too much on this because not many people are that interested. But if what you want to end up is, you know, getting out there by as many means as possible, then great. You know, you've got that added in there as a scenario as well. But this is probably more the reason why you're all sitting here today is the app side of things. I.e., okay, so can we get into this scenario of saying I need to get into an app? Well, great, yeah. The AVE format is the sort of the middle piece, if you like, in this scenario. This is a bespoke format for the Aquafadas solution, but it's something we can point into, be that with HTML or with just text and images from InDesign or video or HTML5 as it's got up there, audio, etc., etc. So there's some great ways of getting content in here, and again, that could be designing it right from the word up. And we're going to show you this as far as taking an you know, flat InDesign file and getting that into here. Now that could be an existing InDesign file that's being used in a publication, or it could be starting from the ground up. But either way, InDesign could be a nice way of getting that more bespoke solution, or take a PDF, take existing communications and get those in there. So, and as mentioned, that's the sort of the more complex route which we discussed there, which gives you that opportunity to say, all right, let's actually take the XML from a content management solution. So the individual elements that are making up communications pieces and being able to automate that. But that's, as I say, it's more complex and more expensive. Which brings us to, I suppose, this thing. How much does it cost? Well, to give you an idea, if you want to get into producing an eBook style thing, I'm talking 150 quid per e-publication, all right? If we want to get into the joys of an app, it starts from actually under £500. So we're not talking megabucks in this scenario. Now I'm qualifying this, as I say, with the fact that, as mentioned, we can start from, you come to us at Dreamtek and you say, I've got this great idea, I want to produce an app around it. We can do that. And we can take that from a blank screen, computer screen, and write the code we've got teams of people that do that within the company. However, if you want us to do that, that unfortunately costs slightly more than 500 quid. But I have to say we are quite competitive on that basis as well, so don't, you know, talk to us if you want to. But at the end of the day, this puts you in a situation of, okay, you're going to do some of the work here, potentially, or even if not, it's going to keep the costs down because there are bespoke off-the-shelf solutions here that put you into this scenario where it's not just, ooh, it's a PDF, look, now it's an app, it's exactly the same. No, it's an enriched version of that. And over here, don't forget, we've got analytics in the picture as well. So therefore, we've got the opportunity with this side of the water to say, okay, not only are you producing something more compelling, but I can also find out about how it's being used. Now, in both scenarios, you can to a certain extent do that because, of course, you can embed things like HTML into these scenarios as well. So therefore, you can embed live forms, live polls, etc., etc. Some of that's depending on what you're reading it on. But if you want actually to tie into some of these analytics surveys and analytics tools and companies like we've been showing you already with Flurry, you know, that's where, okay, you need to be on this side of the water. Good thing is also, if you happen to have come across any of these companies in the past that do the, we'll take your PDF and we'll do it all for you, don't worry, and then you won't have any knowledge of how it's actually getting out there as an app. They tend to take a chunk of money out of any revenue. Not a worry for some of you guys who don't want to produce the revenue, but for those of you who do want to sell an app out the back end of this, that can obviously reduce your profits because ultimately you're going to give away 30% of anything to Apple or Google or Amazon or, well, it's slightly less I think for Google, isn't it? 20% on Google, I think, and who knows on Windows. But basically it puts us in that scenario where, okay, we don't do that. We don't take a chunk of your revenue out of this. We're just saying to you, okay, pay us for the service, and you know, you can get up there and produce your own stuff, or we can help you. We can offer the design services for you if you want. But you know, as far as the revenue out of any apps are concerned, it's all yours to share with, as mentioned, those said app stores. So I suppose we ought to give you a little bit of a view of what we're talking about. We'll do that. I'll do that live in a second, actually. Let's go back to the videos, just as a last bit. On the agenda, I said I'd be doing the video piece at the end of the morning. We won't do that because I want to get you out of the frustration of watching a whole bunch of slides and hand over to Johnny so we can actually show you how to do some of this stuff in a minute. So we'll talk about the video side of things now. Things you should be bearing in mind. Well, firstly, as mentioned a couple of times, all right, we actually do video creation ourselves. We have whole video teams here if you want. Or we can train you up on video because we have training courses we run on video. So if you want to be doing that, super. But you know, something that you need to be getting in there. We also, as mentioned, do this whole range of different types of scenarios where we can either set up studios for you or give you that pod side of wheel it in and there you are, there's a studio on the fly in your organization. So for video streaming, we also do a whole bunch of video streaming solutions as well. Evidently today. But basically this gives you the opportunity in a corporate environment to start streaming up, as mentioned, you know, important keynotes, etc., in a secure environment as well. So this, either way, we can set this up on a nice secure internal environment or external environment, depending on the sort of companies you are. But one of the things you should consider is, how do I go about controlling this? If what you're creating is perhaps ending up with a whole bunch of communications of video coming in from different directions. So Dreamtek has a software solution called the Hub, which sits hand in glove with all the other bits and pieces we've been talking about, which allows you to aggregate video, get it coming in from different feeds, and have that collaboration feature, if you like. So we can have people out on racetracks videoing live, getting that into essentially a cloud-based, server-based scenario. But also you can mix up with various other inputs, basically. The key thing about this is it gets us into the situation of you can actually control what's being produced and track what's being produced. So I can say, if I'm controlling production of any publication, I can be put on the system, on the Hub, basically, as someone who is organising that and making sure I know what's going into the system. I don't want bits of video creeping into, and this could be not just going into an app, it could be going out onto streamed scenarios, etc., etc. I don't necessarily, I want to have control of that, don't I? Certainly if I'm in a corporate environment, I want to make sure that anything that's broadcast out there in whatever format, I know what the heck it is and I've ticked off on it. Which is why it's also important to say, okay, you can track who's ticked off on it as well, who's produced something, who's actually been the designers, the editors, the people who've said, yeah, that's great, it's fine, okay, it's super. So therefore, that gets us in a good situation, but again, ties in with analytics as well. So again, anything we're doing in the hub, we can actually output via apps, as mentioned, via streaming solutions, just onto the internet, basically. And again, that ties in with analytics. So therefore, we can say to you, okay, anything you're producing there, we can, again, give you feedback on. So you can find out numbers, areas, geographies, who's viewing this, who's actually done anything with it. So that's it from me. Basically, we've gone. I feel like we've lived the dream of the last 60 minutes, basically, and getting into the joys of understanding some apps. At this point, I'm going to say to you, because we're going to be swapping over in a minute, any questions? Is this answering? Go on, Victoria.
You mentioned eBooks, but how about Audible books? Because they're quite popular now, and the download rate through iTunes and things.
Yep. As in purely Audible.
For me, I'm just getting into ebooks and thinking, why should I bother? Should I just do the audio version? Because that's what I'm hooked into right now. Nanosecond environment, you're multitasking.
So there's a chap called Mahibrian who, let's show you some examples. There's a chap called Mahibrian who came up with a nice little, back in 70s, 80s, nice bit of research into communications. And you may well be aware of this, I don't know. But ultimately, he said 97%, I think 93% of communication is actually not the words. I.e., if you're relying just on it's written. Exactly, yes. So basically, I think the figures are something like this: 43% is audio, so just the intonation of voice and so on. That communicates obviously about 5 times more than the joys of just the actual words you're communicating. But the other 50% is video, is visual. So therefore, to a certain extent, hopefully that answers, in particular for people who work in visual media, why visual is quite a good thing, really, isn't it? So therefore, so let's give an example of something along those lines, though, for instance. So you can hear this. I haven't got the speaker plug. Ooh. Sorry. See, this is going to be a Sony Lumiere moment, isn't it? So basically, this is a little on the subject of children's books that are moved into the app environment. So we've got here something that combines, if you like, a reading book, basically. So there we are, with, for instance, if I just move over here. For those of you on that side of the room, it is reading at the same time. Sorry, I should have plugged the speakers in, but swapping around between devices. So you're getting the whole combination of both, basically.
I noticed this important time when I've downloaded audio books, and it's just monotone, I can't listen to it. Kind of thing. But I wondered what the stats were. I'm guessing I can have a look at Flurry as in an ebook or an Audible now.
Yeah, I've not actually done comparison there, just purely audio, actually. I suppose I'm perhaps a bit of a martyr to my own banging on about this all the time. But, I mean, I'm sure there are, again, there is a marketplace to be had there, isn't it? But obviously that's very specific to just streaming audio. But, I mean, you could be using this as your foundation for delivering it, to be perfectly honest. And at least if what you're doing is delivering some visual media. I mean, there's another study. You're lucky about this because I'm doing an MBA on this at the moment. There's another study that said basically it's great if what you're doing is putting visuals up alongside audio that marries up with it. But it's actually detrimental if you start putting visual up that isn't related to it. So therefore, you need to get it right. But I think there's definitely merit in having it. But this also includes a whole bunch of games which it's a good example of how, and this is all produced using Aquafadas here. So this isn't coded from the ground up. So this gives you an example of what you can do here. So we've got, I'm just going to turn the audio off.
How much is that software?
Well, as I say, you could produce, or rather you could publish. Those costs I gave you were the publishing costs, if you like, 500 quid. So for a one-off app. But there's bits in here, there's extra bits we add onto it. So being able to add in games, because the game side of things comes again as a sort of a nice add-on that you can just tick the box and you can have it. So you can have, for instance,